Is there anything Final Fantasy XIV fans might find in 16 where they're like, oh, is that a callback to this, or that reminds me a lot of this?
The one thing that I can assure there'll be a lot of are very bad puns in the quest names and achievement names. That is something that I knew from the beginning I wanted to carry over into Final Fantasy XVI.
I confess I expected more from the old man.
Hand over the dominant, and I'll leave you in peace.
You would dare to make demands of me.
You have this world with the mother crystals. And mother crystals are pretty much everything that this realm revolves around. They are the sources of the ether, and the ether is the source of magic. In a lot of past Final Fantasies, magic is used for battles. In Final Fantasy XVI, in the realm of Valisthea, you will have people using crystals to fill up their water jugs. You'll have crystals that get the fires hot enough to create steel, but they don't have the technology to get those fires even hotter to be able to make steel. But we have steel in the world. How do they do that? Well, they have magic. So why do we need to find a way to make fire hot when we can just use a fire crystal?
That's a nice trick. You'll have to teach me sometime.
Because you have these people relying on the magic, they don't learn how to do a lot of stuff, and they rely, in some places, too much on these crystals, which again becomes the center pieces in the narrative, where what happens then when the magic starts to run out? The first thing they think of is, well, we need to go and invade this country and get their crystal because that one's still working. And that creates a lot of that tension there. But ultimately, the mother crystals are dying and the power is running out. And there's going to be a time when the world is going to be faced with this decision. What do we do without the mother crystals? How are we going to be able to survive without them? Creating this kind of story that shows when humanity is put in that type of situation to have to survive without something that they've relied upon for so long, and seeing how certain people react to that. The Fallen are, as their name suggests, they fell. They had a civilization that was highly advanced to a point where they were able to leave the land and create their cities in the air. They had their airships. They had their floating cities. Like Icarus flying too close to the sun, they went a little bit too far, and for a reason, again, that I cannot mention here, they ended up falling. They lost the magic. It all fell to the ground. And it's still, you have those ruins remaining 1,500 years later. For the people living in that world, they see this as, okay, these are people that tried to get a little bit, they were too advanced, and in their hubris, to try to get too close to God, they fell, and there's a lesson to be learned from that. There is that little bit of wariness there, that we're not going to follow the same footsteps, but again, there's always going to be the people that are like, yeah, but it's all about power. And you'll get to see kind of who the Fallen were, what their ultimate influence was on the current civilization, as well as many other things, again, that I can't talk too much about.
Wait! Clive, was that?
The Dominant. The man who killed my brother.
Are you absolutely certain?
I've seen him every night for the past 13 years. Watched as the flames of his icon took Joshua.
Cow!
We do want to give the players a lot of the lore, basically just through playing the game, not in just like lore dumps. We didn't want to have, instances where players were just going into a cutscene and then you'd have one player just kind of talk at you for 5 minutes, telling you everything you need to know, with Clive saying, oh yes, oh yes, oh yes, and then quest ending and then you go back to doing something else. We didn't want to do that. We wanted to try to tell the story through the cutscenes, through what's going on, imply a lot of things through the dialogue. Final Fantasy XVI is very streamlined, I think, compared to 14 in that. The dialogue is a little bit more focused, implying a lot more things rather than just telling them directly to you. There's going to be lots of different places to find your lore, whether it be in side quests where you can go and learn about the people living in the different areas, the people that are going to be living in that hub, the hideaway that you visit are going to give you a better idea of what's going on around the world, but also just in these regular people's lives. You're going to get very profound quests that talk about, they get into politics, but you're also going to get these quests that talk about, one woman's life, a day in her life, and what she does, and the struggles that, she has to deal with in her everyday life. And in that sense, get a picture of, okay, the world is not just, politics and intrigue, but there's also these small problems as well. Scale has always been, again, I think that focal point in the narrative, in the story, and in the game in general. Showing that difference in size from just one human in a whole continent all the way up to this giant mythical creature, fantastical creature that has the power over an entire continent, but when you look at it is really, again, just a man or a woman that just happens to, again, turn that big. That man and that woman, that person that embodies the icon, the dominant, how they take that power and how they use it on that grand scale. There are going to be things that you can go around and read. So you'll go into a building and there might be a bookshelf. And every now and then you'll be able to target one of those books and be able to read a page from that book. There are signs in the pubs that you enter that you can find out what's going on in the pubs. There are notes that you pick up. Clive has a reading desk in his chambers in the hideaway, and letters will be delivered to him every now and then, and these will kind of talk a little bit more about what's going on in the world. A lot of times when Clive completes a quest, several days after the quest is over, the person that Clive helped will send a letter to kind of follow up on what happened after the quest was over. A lot of lore is given in like help text. Item help and weapon help, all of those have little text blurbs. But that was fun, being able to go in there and try to not just say, okay, it's a bronze sword, it's a sword made of bronze, but talk about this sword is used by soldiers in this army, and they use these cheap materials because these reasons, and they have to import this from this place.
All this bloody running. After them.
I know that a lot of times help text is just something that people just kind of skip over because it's just stating the obvious. I didn't want the help text to state the obvious. I wanted them to be a part of the lore as well. Sometimes we have like quotes from famous people that lived long ago. We have like poems. It's not direct inspiration, but I looked at like Magic the Gathering cards, how they would have a lot of different type of that flavor text at the bottom, and it wouldn't just be an explanation of what's going on in the card. They'd usually have some kind of historical reference, or they'd have a quote. And I thought I wanted to do something like that with Final Fantasy XVI as well. There is a lore master in the game as well. His name is Harpocrates, and he will be in this hideaway that Clive can go to. Basically what Harpocrates has is what we call the 1,000 tomes, and it's the 1,000 tomes are his compilation of all this knowledge, and Clive can access this at any time in the game. It's like a lore dictionary or a lore encyclopedia. It has hundreds of different entries from everything to enemies in the world, flora, fauna, geography, history, cities, people. The two best things about this is, one of them is that you can come in and access it at any time, and not just by going to the hideaway, but also you can press pause during any cutscene. And by pressing pause during a cutscene, you have the option to open up the lore dictionary. We call it our active time lore, the ATL. So basically, in real time during a cutscene, if you hear a name or something that you don't recognize or you can't remember, you heard it, but you can't remember who that person is, you can press the pause button during the cutscene and then press another button that will bring up this lore dictionary. You can, again, learn about those names that maybe you had forgotten about or that you hadn't heard about. So they're always understanding what's going on in the world, because a lot of times in the cutscenes you're going to get a lot of different names and they're all going to be kind of sounding weird, and you're like, I don't know if I heard that before. Who is this guy again? What was that place again? You'll be able to use the active time lore to refresh your memory. The other thing that is great about this Harpocrates lore dictionary and Thousand Tomes is that it updates itself throughout the game. So the entry that you have on, say, Rosaria is going to be different early in the game than it is later in the game. As things happen in Rosaria, that entry will be updated, and then you can see all the past entries and how things have updated as well. I know that Yoshi-san in the past has mentioned things like Godzilla, he mentioned like Ultraman, Kamen Rider, all of those tokusatsu type of things. For the game in general, I would think that, yeah, a lot of those visually, you're going to get a lot of that in the cutscenes as well. Things are very kind of in your face. The reactions that the characters make during those battles, the motions that they do are all very action TV show, action anime style. Everybody's in that kind of like idle pose and they're all really into it. Myself personally, one thing that I was reading was a book that came out recently called Mordu. It's this crazy literary fantasy that takes place in this walled-off city that I think is kind of based loosely on Paris, and it takes place thousands of years in the future, and it's fantasy and fantastical and philosophical, and it's got this weird kind of magic. What really inspired me is at the end there's this huge long glossary. It's almost like 100 pages of it, and he goes into descriptions of all of the terms in the world, and the way that he describes them was very, very funny as well as informative. And as I'm looking at this, like, this is exactly kind of how I want to do the help text and the lore translations in the game as well. And so I kind of got a lot of inspiration from that. But if you're into something that's really, really outside the box type of fantasy, I consume a lot of fantasy, whether it be television or novels or movies. A lot of things that I draw upon are just the things that I absorb during my everyday consumption of fantasy. In the end, we're not creating a sequel to Final Fantasy XIV. We're creating something completely new. I think a lot of Final Fantasy XVI's development happened because of the things we learned on Final Fantasy XIV. So we know that we're going to be doing things that maybe go against the expectations of the 14 team. There is that kind of worry that some of the stuff we're going to be doing is like, well, that's not the game I wanted. I really like 14. Why are you going away from that? On the other hand, Final Fantasy XIV's community is like one of the greatest, gaming communities in the world, I think. They're so supportive of each other, and they're so supportive of the development team. And I think that is because Yoshida-san, since his joining the team, has fostered this kind of communication, this relationship with the fans, where he's going to be open with them. He's going to tell them everything that's going on. And that's not just Yoshida-san, that kind of permeates the whole team. So when the team speaks with the community, and when the team develops this game, they're creating something with the fans in mind, because they're listening to the fans and they know what the fans want. So because we have that sense of trust and we have that relationship built up, we know that that community is going to support us in what we do. Because we're honest with them, they can be honest with us, and we can move forward in that direction. So it's pressure, but on the other hand, it's something that's actually been really supportive for us, because we know that they're not going to judge us until they play the game. They're going to allow us this opportunity to try something new, and they're going to support us, and they're going to give us feedback. Again, the effort put into this is really going to pay off, and I think that the trailers that players have seen and what they're going to end up seeing in the end game, that end product that we have, I think it's really, really great because we put so much work into it.